Alright, so I'm going to change it back to what we had before. So put back in your sum equals 0. So just comment it out like normal, but too late now. J is 3. J is less than or equal to 79. And I also want to remind you that for these methods that we've been calling on, so the for and the if, they don't get a semicolon at the end. So double check that your for does not have a semicolon. And we're going to we're not going to print J anymore, we're going to print sum. And we're going to put sum equals sum plus J. Alright, so go ahead and save it real quick. Then run it again just to make sure that it prints what it's supposed to, and it does. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a nested loop. So inside our for loop, we're going to create another loop, or a nested statement anyway, because we're not really going to make another loop. We're going to use an if statement. So we're going to say if J is equal to 65, remember, test it, it has to be double equals. Come on down below, put in your brackets. So this is within our for loop. So if J is equal to 65, we're going to tell it to break. So if it's not 65, it's like saying that this is part of the else statement. So the sum and the system operator is part of the else statement. But if J is equal to 65, it's going to break out of this loop. So kind of like in the video when they help Sheldon out, and Wallace goes and puts in that escape clause into his friendship algorithm, you're putting an escape clause into your for statement. So let's go ahead and run this. Alright, so it didn't make it back up to 3,000. It stopped at 22,077 because that's when J was equal to 65. So even though our for loop is going to try to run until J is greater than 79, this break in the middle of it forces us straight out of the loop. Alright, so now that we know what the break does, I'm going to comment this out. So I'm going to show you a trick here in Eclipse. So are you ready for this? Highlight your if statement, including the brackets, and on your keyboard, hold together Control, Shift, backslash. And it creates a comment block around whatever you have selected. Pretty nifty, if you ask me. So what I want you to look at is, if you notice, we initialize and declare J in our for loop. So what I want you to do is come on down outside of our loop and do a system out print line and print J. See this little arrow over here? J cannot be resolved to a variable. So what happens is if you use J and you initialize it and declare it only within this for loop, it is out of scope. So scope is something that we're going to have to kind of talk about a little bit here, but it's definitely going to affect us later. So what we're saying is that the scope of J is only within this for loop. So remember before we printed J within the loop and it turned out totally fine? We can't print J outside of the loop because it's not outside of the loop. It doesn't exist. Now, if we came up to line 12 and we said int sum equals 0, comma J, and we take the int out of here, out of our for loop, all of a sudden we don't have a problem anymore because J has been initialized, or not initialized, it's been declared outside of that for loop, so we can use it outside of the for loop. Alright, so go ahead and run this. So it runs and the last number printed is 80. So why does it print 80 instead of 79? Well, look at what we have in our control expression. For j less than or equal to 79, it's going to execute this loop. So when j is 79, this loop executes. Sum equals sum plus j. It prints the sum. It goes back up to the beginning, but j is now 80. So it breaks the loop and prints 80. That is a really weird concept to understand, and it's going to take you a little while to kind of get that down pat, but just know that the next number that it's going to print for your iteration is going to be the number that breaks this loop, so 80. Now, I will tell you that with the for loop, just like the if statement, you can do it without brackets if you only have one line below it. So like right here, we have one line, sum equals sum plus j, but then we have a second line to print the sum. So this would not actually work with outside of the brackets. So the only time you can ever do that is if you just have one line within your for loop, just like in the if statement. The most common way you'll see it is within the brackets, even if it is just one statement, because that's usually what people look for with Java. All right, so now we're going to create a nested loop. So we kind of did that with the if, but this is going to be really two loops instead of two different statements. So what I want you to do is select from row 24 all the way to row 12. Do that Control-Shift comment. Put the whole thing into a big old comment block. So now we have a whole new code to start with. So I'm going to scroll down to row 27, and I'm going to initialize count equals 0. So we're going to kind of leave it a little easier on us this time, just to kind of understand the concepts. So we're going to create our first for loop. So for int j equals 0, semicolon. So we're starting at j is equal to 0. My control expression, we're going to execute this loop as long as j is less than or equal to 20, semicolon. And we're going to increment j each time we pass through the loop. So come on down, put in your open close brackets. And inside that, we're going to create a nested loop. So we're going to create another for loop. And we're going to call it integer k. So integer k equals 0. And we're going to run this as long as k is less than 5, not equal to, just less than. And we're going to increment k by 1 each time this loop operates. So inside that loop, I'm going to do count plus plus. So like we were just talking about, since this doesn't have brackets on it, it's the only line within this for loop. Now, what's missing from this for loop? We don't have brackets in this for loop. We don't need them. We just need that one line. If we had more than a line, we would put the brackets in. And you know what? I'm inspired by that k less than 5. Come on back up to line 28, and we're going to say j less than 20 instead of less than or equal to. So one of the things that you're really going to have to get used to with Java is that we don't start counting at 1. Usually when we start at 0. So if it's going from 0 to less than 20, it's going to run 20 times because it's going to do 0 through 19. Same with this. If it's going 0 to less than 5, this inner loop is going to run 5 times. If we started at 1 and went to 20, it would also run 20 times. So let's kind of talk through what this code is going to do. So it's going to start at j equals 0, and then it's going to come down to the next line, and then it's going to run this inner loop 5 times. Once this code runs 5 times, it's going to come down. J has now increased to 1. It goes back up. J is now 1. It comes down, runs this code 5 more times. So for every once this J code runs, K runs 5 times. So while J runs only 20 times, K is going to run 100 times. So what I want to do is I want to come out of my loop and verify that it's going to run 100 times. So let's do system out print line. We're going to print count because that is where our count is being kept. So this should print out 100. Are you ready to test it? All right, let's test and see if our nested loop works the way we think it does. Yep, it gives us back 100. And a last little tip for you. The number one mistake you are going to make in this lesson is you are going to come at the end of your for line and you're going to put in a semicolon, just like that. Now look, I want you to take a look at this. There's a semicolon here. This is not going to work, but also does not give you an error. So be cautious, be cautious, be cautious. If something is going wrong, this is your first line of defense. Check the end of your for statements. Make sure that there's no semicolon. So go ahead and save this, turn it into Moodle. You guys have a few questions to answer for lesson 11, but you have 2 days to accomplish them. And you have a program that you're going to have to write that you're going to have to stretch yourself for. Now, this is not going to be an easy one. So you're going to prompt your user. So you're going to need a scanner. You're going to have someone enter their name. You're going to create a for loop, and you're going to use substring. So you may need to go back to your string operators to remember how to do substring. And what you're going to do is you are going to print the name in reverse, all in lowercase. So you're going to have someone enter their name. That information is going into a for loop. You are going to use the substring to take each individual character and place it back out in lowercase. Good luck!